What's up, guys? Connor here, back with another video. We got a gloomy day in Washington. I just got back from driving the Mini Cooper here. We're gonna jump right onto it, and we're gonna work on the Celica today because it is so rainy outside. There's nothing else to do. So I'm really excited. Let's just hop right into it. Alright guys, we're back in the bay of the Celica. This is going to be part 2 on this build. What we did last time was we removed out all these parts. If you guys haven't seen that video, go check it out. Basically, we just got everything prepped to kind of start installing the kit. So the first thing that we're going to actually work on today is we're going to take this pipe. This is the ventilation tube that we took out last time. It was the last part, and we actually need to remove this bracket down here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a Dremel, and we're going to cut this guy off right now. Alright guys, here's the same ventilation tube. I skipped some time just to make sure that this was going to work before I did it, but what I'm doing now is I just have this the tube in a vice grip here with some rag so it doesn't damage it as we're closing it down. And I'm actually just going old school. I was going to try and grind it off, but we're just going old school with a saw with a metal blade on it, and basically we're just slipping it right in between there and sawing down through. So I hope you guys can see that, but what we need to do is remove this bracket so there's no more space for the supercharger to go into. So you can see that I've gotten to about right there so far, and I've cut all the way from this tab right there, if you can see it. So we're almost all the way through. I'm going to go ahead and finish up on this piece, and I'll show you once the bracket's clean how we can prep this surface so it's not going to get damaged. Alright guys, so kind of missed it there, but basically we just sawed down perfectly down this side. You can see right there is where I cut along this ventilation tube. Here's the bracket that we needed to remove, so I just sawed it straight down on that side. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to sand this up over on here, and we're going to get rid of all these little sharp edges that are right there, and then we're just going to paint this with some spray paint. That way it doesn't rust out or be exposed to any of the elements. So I'm going to go ahead and take it off the vise here and prep it for some paint. So here is our sanded piece. I just hit it with some 60 grit, got it all flush on where we cut that bracket off right there. And I'm just gonna hit it with some black spray paint, and it'll be ready to install this again. Okay guys, so while we wait for that ventilation tube to finish drying, and it's gonna go right up into that hole up there, and it's gonna come back down and just get reinstalled. While we wait for that, we're gonna install the alternator bracket here. And the lower alternator bracket we have, and that's gonna go right here on this body mount. That bolt that we took out for the alternator, and we're going to install this piece in its place. So this is a floating nut that's inside of it, and we're just going to set this just like that. Okay guys, so as you can see in that last clip, we got this little lower bracket installed right here. One of the things that was missing, and that I knew was actually missing from this kit, was that we're missing a bracket that goes from the bottom edge to this bracket here. So there's actually, this is a floating nut, so this thing actually just moves like that. And below here, there's a bolt right here that you can see that there's actually supposed to be a bracket that comes up, and there's two that mount to this point here to keep this solid. So what we need to do is we need to mock up a piece of sheet metal that will kind of go down there and have the same angles that we need, and we're going to send that off to get made for us, and it's going to be something super rigid, and we'll be okay. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and do that and mock it up, but for now we're actually going to move on to the supercharger itself. So what we did was we put in this line right here. As you can see, there's a little tee off that comes down, and it connects down here, and this is where our boost gauge is going to go. And I went ahead and bought a new line already right here that needed to get replaced. But first things first, I'm going to actually clean this up a little bit. I started in one of my previous videos, and I started sanding this down. And basically this is going to be a standard kind of polishing job that you would do on your intake runners or your manifold or anything that you have like this. Basically I started with 60 grit and got rid of all the grime that was kind of on here. So if I lower this, you can see that there's a ton right here still. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to first clean this up. So I'm going to put some time in and clean this up first, and once we get to that point, we can actually bolt this whole thing up. It did leak a little bit of oil on the way up here, so I do have some Napa supercharged oil that's going to go in here. But I'm going to go ahead and just get this thing cleaned up and get it looking how I want to in my bay. So that way it'll be all clean, and you can tell up here with these were polished at one time. And there's actually covers that go right here. So they actually looked really good back when they were on the car, but time has kind of taken its toll on these things, and they've seen better days. So up here I had the same polish job done. I actually went to go redo everything, but I will redo it all at once. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and I'll check back in with you guys when I get this thing cleaned up how I want it to. Okay guys, so here is our new used Greddy supercharger. I hit it with some polish and I think it looks a lot better. You can still see in this inlay is actually what the entire supercharger looked back in here, and I actually was gonna clean that out, but I actually really like it. I like how it's darker there, so you can actually see the Greddy logo just like that. And by no means is this gonna stay this clean. I will keep it clean while it's in the car and wash it and keep it polished and whatnot. But as we drive around, you know, this is gonna get dirty, and that's just how it's gonna go. So getting down in here is pretty impossible to clean this. Either by hand or by machine. I could use a Dremel with some sandpaper on it and actually get in there and fine tip, get this all out. But I actually really like the way it looks now. So if you remember before, I'll put a picture in right now. This is what the supercharger looked like. And here's what it looks like now. So it looks a lot better, a lot cleaner, a lot more new. It's just gonna look a lot better in the bay. By no means is this car a show car anymore. But what I did in the meantime was that I actually repolished this top. And that's a really simple process. So now this cover up here is again polished, so we're gonna get rid of this nasty kind of half polished intake manifold right here, and it's gonna be a nice polished upper and this really clean supercharger on it. So I think it's gonna match really well. And in order to do this, if you guys are interested in doing something like this with the head, what you need to do is start out with a low grit sandpaper. And by low grit, I mean the lower the number, the better. And you're gonna etch in to this manifold kind of the base scratch that is going to clean it up. So what I did is I hit it with 60 first, 60 grit. That's this really thick stuff right here. So you can see it's pretty thick on that sandpaper. I just went back and forth. You keep it in one motion. So I don't go circular. I go just straight across the surface here. So like for example, like that, I'm not gonna touch it because my hands are dirty, but you would go like this and just keep all the lines in the same direction. So you want that grain to be going the same way. Start with 60 and work your way to the higher number sandpapers as you go. So 60, I think mine was 120. From 120 I went to 220, I think it is, or 250. From there I went to a 500. And then once you start to get into the 500 range, it's really wise to do wet sanding. So just dip it in some sandpaper, and you can see we have a nice finish on the outside there. And then hit it with some polish. I like to use Mother's polish. It's this stuff right here. Actually, this is Never Dull. So I hit it with this wadding polish, and then I actually put it away. Over here we have some Shine Like No Other Mother's metal polish. So I hit that on the top, and you get this nice clean finish on it. So we're ready to take this off. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this out, and we are going to kind of get this whole thing out so that way the supercharger can go on. So I'm gonna set the camera up and we'll return back then. Alright guys, so I may have lied to you for a little bit. Before I pull off this manifold, I'm actually going to run the line for the boost gauge first. And the reason for my choice on doing that is that if I have the boost gauge set up in my pillar here, I can run that vacuum line through the firewall now and then get it plugged up, because I think once we put that on, it's going to be a pain to get to. So actually what we're going to do first is we're actually going to install a boost gauge up to the A pillar through the firewall and then out to here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove one of my gauges out of the pillar, and then we'll get set up to run that line through the firewall. Alright guys, we're inside the Celica here. There was a voltmeter gauge here that just gave me readings on my battery. It was literally just like a voltmeter as a gauge that I used just to make sure that I wasn't going to kill my car if I was listening to music in a parking lot or anything. And so I took that out. All it was just like 2 wires right here, so you can see a red and a black. And I pulled that out, and we're actually going to feed the boost gauge into here on this section here. So we will have boost and oil pressure, which I think is amazing. I actually run the fuel trims off of my phone using an OBD down here. So we don't need any of that. That will all be read off of my phone, which I mount usually. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pull this component down. This is just a trim piece that's plugged up on there. So a lot of people pull these off and they paint them and stuff. And I have a hole pre-drilled right here, and this is where we're going to run our vacuum line for the boost. So boost gauge will go in here, vacuum line will come out here. We're going to run it right down with these wires all the way down underneath the dash and then through the firewall out to the engine. So I'm going to go ahead and mount up this boost gauge and then run that line, and I'll show you guys where the firewall access is for your hold if you need to run anything to your dash. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back up with the gauge in it, and I'll check back in with you guys in a little bit. Okay guys, so here's where we're at now. I kind of cut out a little bit just because I was doing the work myself, and it's hard to hold the camera at the same time. But what we did was we had these voltmeter, these connectors right here that just have a pin that slides in, a flat pin. So what I did was that I took these, the power cords for these, and I soldered in these little tabs. So all we have to do is just connect it, and we're going to steal the power from the voltmeter that we used to use. This vacuum line is going to run down in there again. So this is all I did though to get power. These are pretty simple. I buy these off of Amazon. I buy like a 240 pack, and I use them all the time. So these are little heat shrink ones that will just work to these tabs, and I make sure all my connectors are the same. So that's what we're going to do for power for the boost gauge, because I didn't really talk about that much. So I'm going to go ahead and run this vacuum line down underneath the dash down here, and I'll show you guys that when I get to it. Okay guys, so what I did here, I took a quick little lunch break, but I'm back. This boost gauge is now in. I ran an Instagram poll online, and I asked, should I put it in the A-pillar and replace it, or should I mount it separately? And most people voted for this, so I like the look of this, so I'm gonna do it. If you guys aren't following me on Instagram, go follow me at Connor.nation, Connor with an O, and I post these polls all the time that can kind of give a little influence on what I do on this Celica, and I like to get involved with the people. So if you guys aren't following me, go ahead and go give me a follow on that. Let's get back to this build. So I ran this vacuum line up here. Here's our hole that's been drilled out for that. I'm gonna run it down. I have these wires already, but what you want to do is get yourself like a little holster right here, so you don't have wires like flinging around in there while you're driving. And what we're gonna do is this just comes out with a couple of clips. They just pull out up here. There's a clip, and down there's a clip. And so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna sneak it right back into that hole, and it's gonna drop us right below the dash. So I'm gonna run this line behind there, and I'll catch up with you guys when I do that. All right guys, so here we are in the dash on the underside, and you can see right there, that's where our pillar comes off, and we can actually have access to get down in here. Now there's a ton of access points that go through the firewall, so I'm actually just gonna run it on the wire that connects with it over here. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's a little hard to film down in here, but this is located just above your clutch pedal. So that's where I'm at right now. Our steering is right here. So if you look all the way over and follow it, there's actually a little hole that goes up, and you can see the light of the garage, the yellow light. That's where your input point is going to be, and you're just going to follow these wires down until you see a hole in the firewall. So I'm going to go ahead and run that through, and I'll meet you guys back in the bay. Okay, so some time has passed. I ran this firewall or this line through the firewall up here, and basically we went through the removing the intake. It's just gonna be 5 volts up here on this manifold to get off the top. Each one of those you'll need a 10 and a 12 and a 14 for what we're gonna do. We had to pull off these evap hoses that were right here. There's 3 of them. And back behind, there's a triangular plate that attaches to here. And that's gonna be some 12s and a 10. I recommend taking the 10 off first, and that gets this bracket off. And then once you can remove that whole piece, this whole thing will come off. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this part off, and we're ready to put the supercharger on. All right, guys, so here we are. That manifold just came out. We're down to the basics of this. This is just covered so dirt doesn't get in there. I've test fitted the supercharger. Yes, I put it on. I didn't record it. That supercharger fits on. We've done a lot of work. In today's episode, just as a recap, we ran that boost gauge through the firewall here. I have mine set right here through this line. You can see it going back through there on that hole. Comes right down, and it's got a freebie just for the supercharger, which is going to be right here. So here's my line ready for boost right here. It's going to tell me, and it's going to plug right into the back of that. We went through and we wired the boost gauge over here. Pretty simplistic electricity wiring. Instagram voted, and we're actually putting it up in the pillar right here, so we accomplished that. All in all for today, besides running around trying to buy these bolts, which I actually bought all new hardware. There's about 5 bags right here of hardware. Besides doing that, you know, I only did about an hour's worth of work on this. There wasn't too much today besides trying to run around and find those parts. Anyways, thanks guys for watching. I'm gonna end it here on this part. A little bit less progress than the last one, but a shorter video. So take it easy guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. See ya.